Hey, I'm Keith Spiro from the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. My guest this week on Let's Talk is former New York Times executive editor, Dean Baquet. Dean, over your long career in newspapers, how many times did you get to yell, "Stop the presses"?
Actually, only once. And I wish I could have done it more times.
All right, well, that is the slogan. So tune in this week for more stories from behind the scenes with Dean Baquet.
We're local and educational. You're watching WLAE-TV. Celebrate.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we do what we always do. We'll cover all the home teams, Saints, LSU, Tulane Pelicans. Breaking it down for us, two of the best we have, Ricardo LeCompte of Channel 4 Sports, WLAE-TV here in New Orleans, and Andre Johnson Jr. of Fox 8 Sports and the Overtime Podcast. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Always good to have you back, Ricardo. Andre's first time on the program, and we always like to...
Welcome in, no.
We always like to let folks know a little bit about your background, where you're from, who you are. Tell us a little bit about Andre Johnson Jr.
From the city, grew up on the West Bank, went to Thomas Jefferson High School, played baseball, basketball there, went up to Baton Rouge, did college at Southern. Then I started the whole sports media thing in Baton Rouge, went up to Ohio in Dayton for a couple years. Got to see Ohio State lose the Natty, got to see the Bengals go to a Super Bowl. They lost that too, but it was there. It was fun to see. Then came back to New Orleans after that, and it's just fun being home because I'll tell you one thing, the North is cool and everything. They can't cook.
No.
They cannot cook up there.
And who wants
It's
to
called
shovel?
seasoning, right?
They don't know that. That's the problem.
Right.
So I missed that part of being down here, but I will say it's a lot cooler up there.
Right. Nobody wants to shovel snow, right?
Oh my goodness, that's the worst part.
That is the worst
That's
part.
the worst part. I'll take this 95 degrees over 23 degrees any day.
Now tell us a little bit about, again, Fox 8 Sports, all the great program there, and of course, a fantastic podcast, the Overtime Podcast, where folks can get that with you and Sean.
Right, Overtime Podcast. You can find that on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, YouTube, our website, and all of that. And that's where me and Sean Fazand, 3 times a week, just break down everything having to do with the Saints, whether we're in season, in the off season, training camp, mini camp. We're always talking about the Saints, and it's just fun to do. And being at Fox 8, getting to cover a little bit of everything. Saints, Pelicans, high school, all the way to the NOLA Gold rugby team.
Yes.
It's cool being able to do that and being home. My grandma can see me on TV.
There you go. That's great.
Stuff like that.
That's an awesome deal, no doubt. Well, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us today. Ricardo, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And of course, always great things going on over Channel 4. Tell us about all the great programming over there.
Even though we're in the summer break, I would say, in between football and training camp starting, we still have our Sunday night show, 4th Down on 4, 10:35s, as well as our weekly broadcast that we have Monday through Sunday, as well, or 5, 6, and 10 o'clock on the weekends, 5:30 and 10. And also on our WWL Plus streaming app, we've got the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show, hosted by Doug Mouton and Ross Jackson. I'm on this week's episode, we're talking everything as we were trying to figure out post-OTA, post-mini camp, pre-training camp, summer hiatus edition. That's kind of what we're talking about. So we're touching all the things that we saw in the preseason, and we made traditional New Orleans Hurricanes in our last call. So
all right.
Yes. And we had plenty of those.
There you go. The entire news team in there.
Oh, yes. It's always after we make those, how many people go up and go, can you make us another drink? Can you make an extra one? We're like, sure, why not?
There you go. Sounds good. Well, welcome back to the show, and welcome to the show on your inaugural visit. All right, let's get started with, again, LSU, again, undefeated in the College World Series, on the cusp of going to, again, the Championship Series. Again, we're taping this show on a Wednesday. They will be taking on Arkansas tonight at 6 p.m. for the right to be able to go to the Championship Series. Arkansas has to beat them twice. Let's talk about the Tigers' journey to Omaha.
Yeah, and hopefully as we try to predict what's going to happen, or kind of forecast what's going to happen tonight against Arkansas the second time, one thing that stands out to me, obviously, is like LSU's two aces, right? Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson have been fantastic, not only this postseason, but throughout the regular season. Obviously, Cade Anderson is going to be a top 3 pick in the upcoming MLB draft. Anthony Ianson is probably going to be right there as a first, maybe second round pick. But those guys have been great on the mound for LSU. And one of my concerns, I think, kind of going in there, and it wasn't really a concern, it's just when you go into from the box to the chuck, right? The dimensions, everything else, outfielder, just a lot more space. Could that offense produce runs? And so far, they've been doing that. And I think tonight, and hopefully we won't run this back and it ends up being a 1-0 game, I do expect a more high-scoring affair tonight. And I think this LSU offense, especially with Jerry Jones getting back on track, had that big home run before the delay, and then had a big RBI single in the 8th to give them another insurance run. I think that offense is going to show up tonight, and I think they're going to get into the championship game. But based on that, and I think with the arms, it's going to kind of be one of those Johnny Holstaff, right? It's going to be, a couple innings here. Maybe Zach Cowan gets in there. We're probably going to see Chase Shores again in the back half of that game. So far, I've been impressed by the two aces with LSU, with an offense that I was hoping wouldn't struggle at Omaha, not struggle so far. So that's my takeaways from what LSU's done so far.
Andre, your thoughts?
I will say it's good to see that the whole Arkansas Little Rock thing was a bit of an anomaly, right? Because ever since that, LSU's been so much better. And when you head into the postseason, you talk about playing your best baseball when it matters, and it feels like everybody on this roster is playing their best baseball. I mean, Ethan Fry, every time he steps up to the plate, you're almost sure he's going to get a hit. Monster Milam, Derek Curiel, Bear Jones getting back on track. It just seems like everybody, as soon as they hit this postseason, the Super Regional, and now Omaha, they've stepped their game up, and that's what championship teams need to do when they hit the postseason, especially in the College World Series. And you talk about the aces, Cade and Anthony Ianson. I got to bring up the freshman phenom that we saw just yesterday morning in Kason Evans. I mean, he has been incredible, and we're talking about a true freshman, and that was kind of my worry for LSU, and it's been soothed over the last few weeks. Was we know that Cade's going to do his thing, we know Ianson's going to do his thing, but after those two, is there a reliable third pitcher that can come in and blank a team or hold them to one run over several innings? And now we know we have that in Kason Evans. So I like that LSU's got 3 solid pitchers. I wish that the rain delay didn't happen, so Ianson could have made it through that, and maybe we could have seen Kason today against Arkansas instead of having to use him against UCLA. But nonetheless, I have faith in this team's bats because, like I said, everybody in that lineup has stepped their game up in this postseason, and they're hotter than ever.
Let's talk about availability of pitchers. Okay, Ianson threw 44 pitches on Tuesday, right? You had Evans throwing 68 pitches. Cooper Williams threw 21 pitches. Shores threw 11 pitches. So again, first of all, when do you think Ianson will be available to come back with the 44 pitches?
Knowing Jay Johnson, he could be back tonight.
Okay.
And I could see something where in the ninth it's a 1-run or 2-run game, and they know if they can win this game, they don't play until Saturday again. Why not use Ianson for a 1 inning? Because again, you only had him for 44. You have him on that front end before the rain delay. We could see him tonight if there's a situation where LSU can close it out. But with availability, pretty much is going to be all the entire staff. I feel like it would be one of those games where, again, I kind of mentioned it, where like Zach Cowan comes in relief, not necessarily start. Maybe you go with a Benj, or maybe you go Jaden Newt or something, and then kind of piece it together. Maybe we may see I don't know if Case Evans is probably going to pitch tonight, but again, I think it's every arm that's available that you can pitch tonight, and I would not be surprised if we did see Ianson in a situation to close it pitch tonight.
Okay, thoughts?
In a perfect world, we can save Ianson until Saturday.
Of course.
You win this game,
Right.
save Ianson until Saturday in a perfect world.
Right.
Unfortunately, the world is not always perfect when it comes to baseball, and I do think that if it's a close game tonight, if we're, say, looking at 3-2 in the 7th, I'm bringing Ianson in. I want, your best or your second best arm in the game in a close game situation. So Ianson going through 44 pitches, he only really got through, 3 innings? So it's enough there, especially coming off a day or two of rest, to where you can put him back in there. Ideally, LSU's bats stay on fire.
Right.
It's like an 11-5 game. We don't even need to say Anthony Ianson's name. But if it comes down to it, one win to get you to Saturday to the College World Series?
Yes.
Yeah, give me Ianson.
Staying with, you mentioned the bats. Let's stay with the bats for a moment. Your thoughts on, again, what Johnson has done with his lineup. And he's been pretty liberal in terms of moving guys up and down, trying to get the best lineup out there on a game-in, game-out basis.
Usually they say if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
LSU's lineup wasn't necessarily broke.
True.
I mean, they've been one of the best offensive teams in the NCAA all season. So it was a bold move for Jay Johnson to kind of make those aggressive changes that he's made, but it's working.
Yes.
Like I said, it's caused everybody to step their game up and to elevate in the postseason. So, normally when a team is scoring like LSU has shown that they can score throughout the year, you want to leave that alone.
Right.
But I give credit to Jay Johnson for not kind of sitting on his hands there and saying, yes, we're good, but we can do better. Good lineup, it can be a great lineup. And so far, it's been a pretty great lineup.
Thoughts?
Yeah, and kind of to that Jay Johnson point, I think that's one thing that we kind of miss out of all of this. He has been able to push the right buttons in these 2 runs to Omaha, whether it was, the arms that he was able to throw out there in the first go-around. In the second go-around here, like moving Derek Curiel down in the line and moving Jerry Jones here. The other day, it was a big thing about Jerry Jones was struggling. It was 0 for 5 in that game before they played UCLA. All day during practice that day before, he's sitting with them, he's talking with them, getting work afterwards, and then what does he do? He goes out there and hits a home run and is all of a sudden, the Bears back, right? I think he's been pushing the right buttons, and this is, even from the start of this season, where he knew last year's regional appearance wasn't acceptable. So let me go rebuild this entire team. Let me hit the transfer portal hard. Let me make sure that these, top tier freshmen who probably may get drafted, I'm still going to go after them aggressively and end up with a Derek Curiel on your team. He's been able to push all the right buttons, not only in the offseason, but through this season, and now they're in a position where they're 1 game away from going back to the championship series.
To your point, Bear Jones is struggling. He can't hit a slider. He puts him in front of the pitching machine. He's hitting sliders all day long. He comes back again in the game against UCLA, and again opens it up and gets a lead for LSU.
And that's coaching when it comes down to it, because we know physically Jared Jones is able to hit the ball. We know he's able to hit the slider. We've seen how elite of a batter that he is. But especially in baseball, when you play so many games in a season, it's the mental and the emotional that affects you the most. And sometimes as a hitter, if you do go 0 for 5 and it's a big moment, there are times where you step up to the plate and you know your team needs you and you don't come through in those moments, that starts to wear on you, mentally. And you start thinking like, maybe I can't. And it takes a coach like Jay Johnson to pull you aside, because you got to remember, these aren't, 28-year-old pros.
Right.
These are kids, essentially. These are guys in their teens or early 20s. It takes a coach like Jay Johnson to pull you aside and tell you how much he believes in you, tell you that, you're not moving to 9th in the lineup. He's still going to keep putting you in the batter's box and still giving you opportunities. He's going to work, like you mentioned, work with you on the side so that when that moment comes, he still believes that you can come through big. And we've seen him do that in his last few games.
And one of the criticisms throughout the season was the lack of patience at the plate for the Tigers hitters, and we've seen a lot of patience up in Omaha during this run.
Yeah, we have seen it. You've seen it from Milam. You see it from Ethan Fry or Jake Brown, like guys knowing the approach they have to take. And
working
again,
those pitches, right?
And they are working those, getting those guys, getting that pitch count high, which is always important. It's if you don't score those runs, those innings, how much work did that pitcher really have to do to get out of that trouble or certain spots? So certainly they're doing that. And again, it goes back to you have a coach, you have a team that knows how to win here, how to play in Omaha, and sometimes you probably wouldn't see that from a newer team in those kind of situations, like, hey, let's like stay within ourselves, but at the same time, we have a game plan of how we want to approach this stuff. And it's just something about being there and having a school that's been there before and knowing how to win in this type of tournament. That bodes well, in terms of like our approach to the game, how we want to do that, pitch by pitch, game by game, what we're going to do, and you feel kind of at ease as a player when you already know, like, hey, they've won a national championship a couple of seasons ago. They know what it takes to win. So that gives me even more confidence to perform, and I know that whatever they do, I can trust it. And certainly that's what we're seeing. I
would add, again, playing in the SEC, having to deal with, again, SEC caliber teams on a day-in-day, on a series in and series out basis, going to these tough venues, playing in the box. I think it prepares you for Omaha.
Yeah, I mean, they say iron sharpens iron, and that's what the SEC does. I mean, when you're playing against the Vanderbilts and you're playing against Tennessee's and Texas, even the teams that aren't necessarily seen as elite SEC teams could go to a lot of these other conferences and dominate, and that's who you're seeing weekend after weekend after weekend for, 2-3 months straight? So when you're going against that, then now you come to Omaha, you're seeing all the live bullets. You're not going to see a pitch that you haven't seen. You're not going to see a pitcher that you haven't seen. As a pitcher, you're not going to see a batter that's, batting 400 and be like, oh man, I don't have the stuff to get this guy out. Yes, you do, because you face some of the best in the entire country. So that's kind of the benefit when it comes to LSU and everything. And it's interesting, you saw, coming into the regional round, how many SEC teams were there. Only 2 actually make it to Omaha, and the Tigers could potentially bump one of them out tonight. So I think that puts you in a really good place if you're LSU. I mean, even as a fan, I look at the field in Omaha. If you can get Arkansas out, there's only one team that I fear, and that's Coastal Carolina. Fear to clear. I fear to clear for sure.
I would agree with that. All right, let's talk about Arkansas. They've used Root, Gaggle, and Wood, and Gibbler, though, again, but as we were discussing before we went on the air today, they got a deep pitching staff.
Yeah, their staff, the ERA in terms of, in the nation, it's one of the tops up there with LSU as well. I think they still got arms. So we're not saying like, oh yeah, they've burned through all their guys and they can't, they have no one left. No, they've got plenty of arms left. But again, I think that the way that LSU's hitting right now, I think that bodes well for them not having to face those 2 aces. And again, when LSU doesn't have their 2 aces as well, this is where I feel like tonight's game or Wednesday night's game gets to a point where all right, I like LSU's offense in this. I feel like they can score the runs, and that's how this game is going to be won.
Yeah. Talk about tonight, which is Wednesday night, as we're recording this on a Wednesday. Your thoughts on that Arkansas pitching staff and LSU's going up against, again, what we knew coming into this series, in the College World Series, would be a deep staff for that program.
I think there's pros and cons in working your way through the bracket like Arkansas has. I mean, they've played Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
That's a great point.
They're playing every single day, and yes, it's a certain rhythm that you can continue when you're playing that frequently. But there's a certain progressive fatigue that also hits you as a player, as the batters and especially as the pitchers. Pitchers that are used to, by the way, in college, you're used to pitching and essentially getting an entire week before you have to throw again. Even in the pros, you're getting 5 days before you have to throw again. They've got a lot of elite pitchers in Arkansas staff, but they've never really been in a situation where, they threw on Monday, now they might potentially have to throw again on Wednesday. You throw Sunday, you got to throw 3 days later on Wednesday, and oh, by the way, you're going against the best team in the nation on the biggest stage in your sport. So I feel very confident, when it comes to LSU versus Arkansas on a mental, stage as well.
If you were Arkansas, there's a blueprint for this. LSU 2023.
That is true.
That's right.
And there was questions about who's those arms past Skeens. What are they going to do? And you had so many guys. They still had elite arms, and those arms finally came through in Omaha. So it's not like Arkansas, you're playing all these games, and you're like, oh, if you've got those arms and you've kind of had that, LSU did it. Right. So why not you?
Yeah, both teams are two of the top fielding teams in all the country. Both teams obviously have, again, the hitters at the plate. Both teams have the pitching. What do you like tonight?
So like LSU. I think LSU gets it done because of those bats. And then it sets up nicely, because I think it's going to, as you said, I think it's Coastal Carolina and LSU are the 2 best teams that we've seen here, and Arkansas is probably right there as well. I think we get that matchup for the championship series, but I think LSU goes 3-0 and then kind of sets up their pitching for that.
Okay.
I think LSU wins. I think their offense. I mean, we can talk about their pitching, and their pitching has kind of been the highlight. Cade was phenomenal. Casey Evans was phenomenal. But tonight, I think those bats just continue to be hot. You know, I'm picturing kind of I mentioned the score earlier, an 11-5 type game, a 12-6 type game, and I think the Tigers take it in advance.
So if we're wrong, please edit this out.
Yeah, exactly. I never
said that. I said Arkansas, just in case.
Exactly.
That's
just
on
in
you,
case.
Alex. That's on you. But with that said, if they do lose, again, LSU gets another bite at the apple here because they have to be beat twice because they're in the winner's bracket. And of course, again, the championship series starts Saturday, Sunday, and Monday if necessary. Talk about a little bit about Coastal Carolina, if you would. Your thoughts on that team. What looks like, again, the biggest obstacle to LSU winning another championship.
Yeah, and there's a reason why they've won, 25 straight games. Like, they've had the elite pitching. Like, their pitching is, again, we talk about ERAs in the nation. They're one of the top staffs in the country, and they've been having timely hitting. And it's also like, it's funny because I still remember covering Coastal when I was working in South Carolina when they went in that magical run. Of course, we went to LSU in the Super Regional. I know I'm bringing up bad memories for Tiger fans, but it's not like it's a mid-major program. Like, that team is a legit baseball program. And even the conference they played in the Sun Belt this year, you had the 2 championship game opponents where you had Coastal Carolina and Southern Miss end up being regional hosts. Like, they play in a tough conference. They've gotten wins in that, and now they look like they belong because they have all the right pieces to be a championship winning team. And again, I think that when I covered them in 16 when they won it, it was like the start of like, okay, this is the real deal. Like, the Chanticleers are a real deal.
Yeah, you know, Coastal, like I mentioned earlier, I fear the clear. That is a legitimate team in Coastal Carolina because I said the same thing, you know, when LSU Shreveport went on a 54-game winning streak in the NAIA. Crazy. You don't win 54 in a row on accident. If you're a Coastal Carolina, you don't just win 25 in a row on accident, you know. And it's not like this was, you know, the low point in their schedule, you know, beginning of the season where they're playing non-conference opponents. They might have, you know, a smaller – no, they – maintain this winning streak through the end of the regular season, through their conference tournament, through the regional, through the super regional, and now they're on the College World Series stage playing the best in the nation, and they're continually, you know, playing elite baseball. It's not a team that's won 25 on accident. When you get to they got to Omaha, everybody was talking about Arkansas, and I understand why. But to me, the Chanticleers, that's their biggest threat.
If you're an LSU fan, if you want like context, they went into Auburn and won. Right? What did Auburn do to LSU in the regular season? Swept them. So like, they are a legit team.
Yes, no doubt. That's why, to me, it is really you know, it's not imperative, but it would be a good thing for LSU if they could get through tonight's game, win tonight, have the time off, don't even have to use Iacin, have your 2 aces ready to go Saturday and Sunday against, again, whoever you will face. And it looks like, again, based on what we're seeing, it could be Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, and I'll flip it on the other side. Like, if they lose tonight, what does LSU do, right? So I think they pitch Cade Anderson on 4 days rest. Like, I think that's the way you go because you're not guaranteed the championship series. So then that sets up, you say, like, so don't pitch Ianson tonight. You pitch Cade tomorrow. If you can get through there, then the weekend sets up where you go, all right, we go Ianson game 1, we go Case and Evans game 2, and then we just figure out game 3. But so it's not like it's all loss if LSU loses tonight because, again, you get to throw Cade, and it's not 3 days rest, it's 4 days rest. But you would like, ideally, to finish it tonight.
And as I said last week on the program, you know, Arkansas, LSU, there's no secrets. These teams know each other. They know the staffs. They know the hitters. Again, they faced each other, obviously, in the SEC. They got film on, again, them against each other, against other SEC programs. So no surprises between these two programs.
Definitely not. I mean, that's the thing about these two being the only SEC teams in Omaha. You know, you've seen their best stuff. They've seen our best stuff. They've seen Cade Anderson. They haven't had, you know, the success against them as many teams haven't, but they've seen them. They've seen Ianson, you know, Shores and Evans. They've seen all of these guys, and that's what makes it fun because you're not going to surprise them. Everybody who we can throw at them, everyone who they can throw at us, we've both seen. So it's really our best versus your best, or in this case, maybe our fourth best versus your fourth best, but that's what shows the depth of a team, the depth of a pitching staff, because everybody can throw their ace out there and get a win. But can you throw your fourth best pitcher out there and get the hitting support to get a win? And that's what shows who's the best in the nation.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Eric Asher with you again. And also, don't forget, Ricardo LeCompte as well as Andre Johnson Jr. are our guests. When we come back, we'll talk some Saints. We'll get into the Pelicans. Again, a very enlightening interview on the pivot with DeJounte Murray. We'll talk about that as well. If we have time, we'll get to LSU and Tulane football. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports, so stay tuned.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration.
3 seconds. Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Andre Johnson Jr. of Fox 8 Sports and the Overtime Podcast, and Ricardo LeCompte of Channel 4 Sports are our guests tonight. All right, let's shift gears to the New Orleans Saints. I'd like to say, well, first of all, let's get congratulations out to Brett Maxey and Tracy Porter, who have been elected to Saints Hall of Fame. Again, two guys that are really that are known by all Saints fans. Maxey was a really, really good player for the Saints. Heady at the safety position. Again, a guy that really kind of kept that defense together. And then Tracy Porter, again, one of the greatest moments in Saints history. Obviously, again, the interception in the NFC Championship and then in the Super Bowl. Again, he'll always go down in Saints lore as one of the best ever. So congratulations to both those guys.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to say about those two guys?
It's crazy with Tracy Porter, the two most iconic plays and franchise, picking off Brett Favre in the NFC Championship game, and then in that Super Bowl, getting in front of a pass from a New Orleans-born Peyton Manning in front of a New Orleans-born Reggie Wade, right, and taking it to the house on a pick six, when you think of that Super Bowl 44, you're like, that was the play that you think the Colts are going to get down, tie it up, and it's like, nope, it flips the other way, and then this city just goes in absolute bananas.
Yeah, I don't want to be dramatic, but Tracy Porter is one of the players that defined my childhood. I mean, I'm 30 years old, so I always joke, with the older guys in the sports department, I wasn't alive for the paper bag days, or I was, but I wasn't really a football fan. When I first locked into football was essentially when Drew Brees gets here, when Reggie Bush gets drafted in 06. I was 11 years old. So just growing into being a football fan while the team is having the best time in their franchise history, and then ultimately that culminating in a Super Bowl where Tracy Porter jumps in front of that pass. I still remember jumping up and down with my dad and my uncles and everything like that. There's probably 3 or 4 moments in the history of this franchise that will never be forgotten. Obviously, the blocked punt being one of them, but that interception, you can't tell the story of the New Orleans Saints without that play. So just seeing Tracy Porter now as an adult get inducted into the Saints Hall of Fame.
I was talking to Tracy Porter. He's like, it's great that I'm in the Hall of Fame, but now it also means I'm old. Just because you're talking Hall of Fame. He's like, I'm not that old, but It was kind of funny when you said that.
I will say this to you, Andre, again, and your uncles and your dad know this. Again, they were lean years, and we lived through them. So you're very lucky to only have seen, only been around for the Super Bowl years and enjoyed that.
We're catching up to them now.
Well, let me tell you something right now. I'm feeling a lot like this, the Saints of my childhood.
Oh, man.
It's just not a good thing. It's just not a good thing. With that said, guys, not most people that were at minicamp, that were at the OTAs, walked away not really knowing anything about this team, right? I mean, new staff, new quarterbacks, new system, but yet it seems like they were spoon feeding everything to the team during OTAs and minicamp.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't going away. I didn't walk away going, all right, I know who's going to be the quarterback. I know what this offensive line is going to look like. The whole approach to this whole offseason under a first-year head coach like Kellen Moore was basically we're teaching and we're team building. So when you're canceling the final day of minicamp to go to 504 golf, right? If you're in the middle of OTAs, you're let's go play paintball. His approach has been let's install this thing. Let's we're going to teach it to you guys. This is a new system. Let's figure this, let's learn and let's figure this out. And then let's reinforce this teaching, but not really go at it until we get to training camp. I don't mind that fresh approach to that, because again, this franchise in the last few years has just kind of been stewing in mediocrity. So why not try a different approach? And certainly there is a departure from how it used to be, which is fine. And I go, credit Mickey Loomis being if you're figuring Mickey's going to kind of be the one controlling what Kellen, no, it's you don't see that. This is what Kellen Moore wants to do. This is kind of a young coach and his approach of wanting to be hey, let's build this team the right way in that sense, and this is how I feel like I want to take it over and build it, rather than hey, tell me and dictate how to do stuff. And certainly we're seeing his imprints early on, and that's kind of been my biggest takeaway. It's not so much what this team is hey, let's settle these position battles or whatever. It's been here's Kellen Moore, here's the type of coach he's going to be, and let's see if it works moving forward.
I would agree that, again, it seemed that the culture was eroding. Again, when Peyton left and Breeze left, they tried to hold on to it. They couldn't do that. And of course, again, I think it's the right move on the part of Kellen Moore to come in and establish his culture first. And then at the same time, when you have two quarterbacks who are as inexperienced as the Saints quarterbacks are, kind of spoon feeding the offense to them, doing 7-on-7s, 9-on-7s, so you're not putting them in a position where they're going to fail.
Yeah, I said earlier when we were talking about LSU, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
In this case, it was broke.
Right.
Let Kellen Moore fix it. The Saints, what they've been doing the last few years, it hasn't worked a lot. And the benefit to this whole 7-on-7 thing, there's barely any physicality.
Right.
We're coming off a season with more injuries from one team than I've ever seen from any NFL team over the course of a season. So now with Kellen Moore, his focus throughout OTAs and minicamp was clearly, hey, let's get people healthy and let's teach so that once we get to training camp, then it's full speed ahead. So that's cool. But with that being said, there is only so much you can take from him. I can't say, oh, the running game looks great because the Saints have a lot of running backs, but we didn't really see it. The offensive line looks great. I like the shift that they made with Trevor Penning going to left guard. You move Fuaga back to right tackle where he played throughout college. You put Kelvin Banks Jr. in his rightful spot at left tackle that he played in college. So I think you have your best five at offensive line. I like it on paper, but you don't know how good they are until you see them put pads on. Even the defense, I can't judge the pass rush off of what we've seen. The secondary, it looks like in every video you see they're all getting beat, but you have to understand, when you're doing 7-on-7 with no pass rush, you could take the best corner in the NFL, and he's going to get beat if you leave him out there long enough, and that's kind of been the case, So the only thing you can really judge to a degree are the quarterbacks and the receivers, because that's who gets to shine in 7-on-7. So you can see little things from Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck, like with Spencer Rattler. The velocity on his passes much higher than Tyler Shuck, but Shuck has a more delicate touch to his passes. Spencer Rattler has been money over the middle of the field. Tyler Shuck, especially during 7-on-7, he's worked the sidelines. Spencer Rattler's been a little more efficient. Tyler Shuck has been more explosive. We've seen 330 or 60-yard bombs for touchdowns from Tyler Shuck. Spencer Rattler's excelled in the red zone. So you're starting to see the two quarterbacks differentiate themselves in the style that they play, but ultimately you're really not going to know for sure what each guy has until there's a pass rush breathing down their neck.
Break down the quarterbacks for us.
Yeah, and I think the one thing we saw from Spencer Rattler, at least the impression I got from Spencer Rattler watching the OTAs and minicamp, was the fact that there's more of a command. There's more of a comfort now in the second season running that, and you can tell it by the decision making that he's doing in these 7-on-7s. He knows what he's doing there, and that just comes from experience, getting beat up, learning, what I'm doing here. It looks like he has more command. He knows what he's doing, even though it's a new coaching staff and a new offense. He just looks like, hey, I know how to be a professional in my second year. And there are things from Tyler Shuck that you like. You like the arm talent. You go, all right, we were all raving during one of the OTA practices that he's rolling out on, across his body, throwing a sidearm drop pass to an incomplete pass that Cedric Wilson can't make on the sideline, but all of us going, okay, that's cool. That's some good improvisation. All right, he may have something. There are things there from Tyler Shuck where you go, all right, I could see where eventually if you wanted to build this thing around him, he certainly has some of the right qualities that you go, all right, he can do this. But again, we don't know anything because again, it's just glorified flag football in a sense where we're just kind of all right, like that's cool. Like they're making some throws here. All right, they did this. All right, that's fine. But we won't know anything again until, as Andre said, there's a pass rush in front of them.
Yeah.
They're in 11s. They're in team drills. They have to make those decisions. They've got to manage the pocket, maneuver inside, being able to make throws, make the right decisions. We're not going to know all that until training camp. But so far, again, what I've liked about, especially for Spencer Rattler, is that there is a comfort that you only get from just playing in this league. And I go, Tyler Shuck, I see the talent. I don't know how that's going to materialize when we get into the training camp portion of camp.
And you mentioned, the pass rush. That's kind of where we saw Spencer Rattler exposed last year when he got to start. Originally when he came in, you can see the arm talent. You can see a little bit of the mobility. But when he got blitzed, especially with that patchwork offensive line he was playing behind, he was very uncomfortable. And you saw it against Tampa. You saw it against Denver. You saw it against Green Bay when they got shut out. Against the Raiders, when he was throwing interceptions, a lot of his struggles came against the blitz. So Spencer Rattler probably looked a little bit better in the 7-on-7, but that's what I would expect. But one thing I will say about Spencer Rattler, if he's going to win this job, I think he has to do a lot more, because you've got to keep in mind, this coaching staff is the one that drafted Tyler Shuck. I watch a lot of UFC, and in UFC, when you're facing the champion, it's kind of understood, an unwritten rule, you have to knock them out, get a submission, or the decision has to be so far out of question that you're going to win that fight without a question. Because if it's close, the champion always gets the benefit of the doubt, and he's going to keep that belt. In this case, Tyler Shuck is Kellen Moore's champion. He's the highest drafted quarterback since Archie Manning in the 70s. This is the guy that the former quarterback, the new head coach, said, that's my quarterback. They did a lot of pre-draft research on Tyler Shuck, and they loved him. So if this is close, I think Tyler Shuck gets the nod. So if Spencer Rattler, who this coaching staff didn't draft, wants to start week 1, I don't think it can be what and what throughout training camp. He's got to make it so abundantly clear that he's the better quarterback. The coaching staff doesn't have any choice but to start.
You agree with that?
I agree. If it's a tie, Tyler Shuck's going to get the nod. Like that's just what it is, because that's the one that they picked. I'm also kind of curious to see how both these quarterbacks run the RPOs in this offense as well, because that's a big component of Kellen Moore's offense as well. So like if Shuck is showing that mobility and can do that, and maybe like Rattler doesn't look comfortable in that, maybe that gives him an extra nod. But again, those are other things we're going to see when we get into training camp and into the preseason games, where this is where the competition is going to be won, is those preseason games.
Again, 7-on-7, 9-on-7, no way about, no pass rush. There's no hitting. Again, you really can't tell about, as Andre mentioned, the running game, etc. The switch to the 3-4, you really don't know, again, what they're going to look like. Although, again, it looks like it's kind of an incomplete in terms of, again, the personnel that's needed to play that type of system, which means, to me, they'll be probably playing a hybrid this year. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and some of my takeaways of the 3-4 in those practices. One, I watched a lot of Carl Granderson and Cam Jordan and all those defensive ends dropping, because that's kind of how that system works on the 3-4. So how comfortable are those guys going to be when they have to do on certain situations, they have to drop back into coverage and cover the flats or do whatever and get out there. And I know like Carl Granderson dropped some weight this year. He feels like that's better for him, and I asked him about that. He's like, no, it wasn't because of 3-4. I just wanted to feel better. But it also helps when you're 260 trying to get out to the flat versus being 285 and trying to roll out there. It does make a difference. And the other thing I like from the 3-4, and the guy that I'm like circling, and I'm getting ready to watch, and I want to see what he does. I think Alontae Taylor could be potentially a star in this defense.
Nickel?
At nickel, being that rover, that joker, whatever is in that 3-4, and it is one thing when like you hear comparisons like when you go, all right, like the guy that he was looking at to be the comparison to this defense was like a Jalen Ramsey, right? And you go, well, I don't know if Jalen Ramsey and Alontae Taylor, but it does mean something when the coach who coached Jalen Ramsey goes, you potentially could be that, like that, like there's something he sees in that, and certainly Alontae Taylor can now, like we see his flexibility, covering in the nickel, covering in the boundary. And then the fact that he's also could be a run stopper, and we've seen him in the pass rush as well, and he can be a big component in that. I think Alontae Taylor has the potential in this system to like take that next step and be like, okay, he can kind of match or get close to what Jalen Ramsey did in those types of defenses.
Thoughts on that, and then anyone else that maybe stuck out to you that maybe you're excited about?
I definitely agree about Alontae Taylor. I think he is the X factor of this defense in the nickel. Right. Because it was funny when the first time we got to talk to Brandon Staley, he kind of downplayed the whole 3-4, 4-3 thing, because he says these days in the NFL, most teams are playing nickel 75% of the time, and to a degree that is true. true.
Right.
And we saw Alontae Taylor at the beginning of the season last year and how much success he had in that role because, I mean, early in his career, I was like, man, they might even be able to move Alontae to safety just because he's so good when it comes to tackling people.
Right.
You know, when it comes to the run game, a lot of times you don't talk about corners, but Alontae, he's a thumper. He can knock a running back out. We saw how effective he can be in rushing the passer, you know, when it came to Bryce Young and Dak Prescott early in the season. So that's kind of where I want him compared to later in the season when Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo both get injured. He's having to play the outside. He wasn't bad on the outside, but I like him on the inside a lot more. So I definitely thinking he's the X factor. But another name that I'm going to be watching all year, Brian Brzee.
Okay, talk about it. Expound on it.
I think last year, after last season, you can argue that's the best defensive player that the Saints have. I was looking for him after his rookie year to take a leap from year 1 to year 2, and he did. I mean, there were some games where Brian Brzee took over. The first one that comes to mind, the New York Giants game. They don't win that game without Brian Brzee. And now he's going into year 3 with a new system, and I'm interested to see how they'll use him because I don't necessarily see him as a nose tackle.
What position do you think he plays?
I think he's kind of that quote-unquote defensive end
Yeah, so
in the
do I.
3-4. You know, not the guy standing up, but the guy next to him. Because if anything that Brian Brzee has excelled at, it has been rushing the passer.
That's right.
Even as a defensive tackle, you know, he still has to work on his rush defense. But when it comes to getting to the quarterback, that's where he's a lead, and we've seen that throughout his first 2 years in the league. So we saw a jump from year 1 to year 2. If Brian Brzee can make a jump from year 2 to year 3 as well and continue to improve, we could potentially be talking about a top 5, 6, 7, you know, interior defensive lineman in this league.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I have because, again, there was a prototype that they drafted for so long in the Peyton era, into the Allen era, even again with Rizzi as their head coach. And now you're shifting that to a 3-4 and a different type of prototype. And do they have the personnel that they can play that, the 3-4, and play it at a high level?
Yeah, and I think Brian Brzee definitely is one of those guys that we could see as that impact guy. It is those other, is those guys who have been brought in this 4-3 that were supposed to be those guys, those edge rusher guys, and maybe there are guys that maybe steps up into that. Like I'm looking at Isaiah Foskey, a guy who probably could definitely fit a 3.
You would think that, right?
You know, and maybe this is where he makes that jump because he just looked kind of lost in a 4-3 in that defensive system. So yeah, that's still going to be the biggest question is how does this pass rush work with this new system, with these defensive ends that are prototypical for that type of defense? Does it work over here? Again, we'll see how that kind of plays out, when it comes up. I also want another guy, and kind of going off the line, but another guy that you can kind of look at this, in this upcoming season, and go, all right, what does he do? I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is another guy where you've lost your top 2 corners.
He's got to be a lockdown guy, right?
He has to, because you've lost Marshawn and then Paulson Adebo. And granted, with all the flack that Paulson Adebo got he was still aggressive at the catch point when he's defending receivers. He still had one of the higher rates of pass breakups, and he just started finally catching the ball last season when he had all the interceptions. So you lose your top 2 corners, and now you're like, all right, who's going to be that guy that steps in? And so far, in those 7-on-7 drills, and you're watching Kool-Aid McKinstry make plays. I remember the second minicamp day, he's making, had a couple pass breakups, should have had an interception on another one that Spencer Rattler was throwing in the end zone. But that's a guy who I go, all right, does he make that jump from year 1 to year 2 as that lockdown corner, because you're going to need that in this defense.
Right. And one thing that I'll say, we're talking about the big names, but don't sleep on some of the smaller names. Don't sleep on, you mentioned Isaiah Foskey. Don't sleep on the DeMarco Jacksons of the world, because I remember 2 seasons ago, there was a guy here by the name of Zach Bond, who in this system couldn't find any consistent playing time. He goes to a new team in a new system in the Philadelphia Eagles, ironically, and all of a sudden, he's an All-Pro. All of a sudden, he's a Super Bowl champion. He didn't get more talented, or at least not that much more talented from 23 to 24. It was a new system, a new defensive mind who knew how to better utilize him. So now, the guys who maybe haven't gotten that much playing time, the Jordan Howdens of the world, the Isaiah Foskeys of the world, the DeMarco Jacksons of the world, even a Pete Werner who's kind of been a good player but hasn't been a great player yet. I think those guys with Brandon Staley in a new system and a new mindset talking to them that's away from the Dennis Allen / Sean Payton era, I think that could do a lot to benefit them.
$29 million under the cap. It's crazy to say that.
I can't believe it.
29. Thanks, Derek Carr.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek Carr, for sure. do you feel that they'll be aggressive going after pieces that maybe they feel that there's a position group that needs help, a position group that needs a starter? Do you think that they'll be aggressive? Or do you think they'll roll that money over into next season?
I think 2026 is what they're eyeing. I think they're not, I would say, happy in the sense that they've got what they wanted and kind of see what they've got this upcoming season. But I think that's when they get aggressive in 26. Especially, it depends on how the season kind of unfolds as well. If they are struggling, and let's say they're picking high in that top 3 in those, in that draft pick, and then it's like, all right, do we go after now their quarterback of the future? And then if that's the case, and the quarterback moving forward isn't on this roster, let's get that guy first, and then let's start building, and maybe we can get aggressive in free agency and build some of those like positions that we need that starter quality guy or some depth there. But I think for this season, I think any really aggressive moves they make, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think if they were going to make a big move so far, they would have. Not to say they haven't tried. I mean, we're not in their front office, but Asante Samuels Jr., a good cornerback in this league, was out there for a long time. The Saints weren't able to get him. Jair Alexander, he was out there for about a week. Today he signed with Baltimore. The Saints, I don't know if they tried to get him, but they weren't able to get him because you also got to think, New Orleans, from a free agent's perspective, isn't necessarily a great destination, especially if you're a veteran player that's looking to win. This team is not built to make the playoffs and to win this year.
And you're not going to overpay for anybody, right?
Exactly.
No.
So I'm waiting until 2026. This year, this is the test year. I need to see who can play. That's another reason why I would start Tyler Shuck, because in my mind, I've got 17 games to see if this guy can play, because I only invested a second in him. It's not like the Panthers, who invested a #1 overall pick in Bryce Young. He stinks year 1. We have to roll with him in year 2. If Tyler Shuck doesn't work out, if Spencer Rattler doesn't work out, whoever it is, and you're, say, 3-14, 4-13, and you've got an Arch Manning, New Orleans' own, coming out, and you've got Garrett Nussmeier, the son of your offensive coordinator, coming out, you make a move at quarterback. So I think right now is about seeing who can play, who fits the system, where are our needs, who are the silent players that I mentioned that maybe can break out this season, and you start to build around the guy who will eventually be that starting quarterback. I think they've done a good job on the offensive line so far in building the line. Now, you're going to need to find the next Alvin Kamara eventually. You're going to have to add some more weapons on offense, but I think it's a good first step for them so far.
Yeah, I think if you took a poll of like all of us who've been watching, and what we're going to see at training camp, I think all of us would say it feels like Spencer Rattler would win the job, but it feels like the Saints may go Tyler Shuck just because of everything we just mentioned. They picked him. That's the guy. We got to see if this works out. Because I mean, if you go into the season how we're thinking it, we're going, well, Spencer Rattler is a guy who he knows what he's doing in here. Let's see if they can get some wins and make this, But I know no one ever wants to say it's a rebuild or we're trying to figure, but this is a rebuild. This is what it is. So like I said, the Saints may just go, we're going to start Tyler Shuck, but I think for all of us watching, we go, well, Spencer Rattler's probably the better quarterback at this point, but they may end up going Tyler.
They may not admit it, but everybody's eyes sees it's a rebuild.
It is.
Yes. And one of the reasons why, again, as Andre mentioned, you're not going to have big-time free agents coming to New Orleans because they want to win rings. And then are you going to overpay for those guys? And you don't want to do that in the situation you're in right now where you're rebuilding. All right, let's switch gears to the New Orleans Pelicans. I thought we'd be talking today about the draft, about, again, the Pelicans trading, again, the Indiana pick from 2026 they got in the Brandon Ingram trade back to Indiana and getting their 23rd pick in this year's draft, which gave them a 7th overall pick and the 23rd overall pick in the first round, and what they're going to do with that. But DeJounte Murray appeared on the Pivot podcast and was very enlightening about, again, the state of the Pelicans. First of all, I want to say, if you get a few minutes, and it's been more than a few minutes, it's an hour and 7 minutes, okay? I would say any Pelican fan out there, any basketball fan, any human being should go take a few minutes and go watch this podcast of everything that DeJounte Murray has gone through in his life.
Yes.
And to be where he is today and be the human being he is today on a human level, just to be able to, again, to kind of get a view of what has happened in his life. But with that said, one of the things he talked about on the podcast was issues within the organization. He was going through a lot last year. His mother had a stroke. He ended up having to be at her bedside. Again, that's one of the reasons why he left and early in the season to be with her. He ends up coming back, breaking his hand, ends up going back to be with her. Ends up coming back again, and ends up tearing the Achilles against Boston. And of course, his season was over. One of the things he talked about was organizational issues. Didn't get the necessary training table time, lift time, court time. It impacted his mental state. He talked about the lack of professionalism within the organization, saying that, again, he had been in the NBA, and the NBA, one thing about the NBA is teams are professional, okay, and professional organizations. That's your respite. You go there to get your work done. That's who he is, and ultimately he wasn't able to do that in his first year in New Orleans. Andre, I'll take you first. Your thoughts on, because all three of us saw the podcast. Your thoughts on what he had to say.
You know, it fits. It fits with what you saw on the court last season. And just, you know, to mention something else from the podcast, it's night and day from where he came from. You know, right. He comes to New Orleans and he's saying, man, he's hurt. He can't get training table time. He can't get court time. Meanwhile, in San Antonio, he grew up in Seattle, a rough area. His mother got shot in the leg, and Coach Greg Popovich called his mom and offered to move her to San Antonio with Pop's own money. That's the organization he's coming from. Right. You know, he's coming from an organization where he said he had literally been in Pop's office, you know, crying on his shoulder, you know, with some of the things that he's been through. And now he comes to New Orleans and it's, you know, completely different. And you see that with the results on the court, because the Pelicans dealt with a lot of injuries last year as well. But on paper, they were a talented team. I mean, you've got Zion, DeJounte, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy III has a breakout year, arguably, you know, could have won the Most Improved Player award. I mean, it's there, but you can tell there's something that's not clicking. And in my opinion, it starts with the head of the table. Your superstar player, Zion Williamson. I mean, Zion Williamson is a guy who, at this point, he's heading into year 7. He's an NBA veteran, and you're having to punish your star player for being late to the plane. You know, just things like that establishes a culture. Because if you're DeJounte Murray, you may be a veteran, you may be a former All-Star, but you're not going to come in and set the culture. The culture has to already be set. Right. It's not going to be set by the younger guys. It's going to be set by the best player, the face of the franchise, your guy, Zion Williamson, and I don't think he's done a great job setting the franchise, like the culture, and it shows by everything that's underneath that.
Yeah, there's just so much invested into Zion, and when you're seeing the disconnect between David Griffin and Zion Williamson, it's funny because you go, all right, you can only choose one, and David Griffin's the one who ends up going and keeping with Zion. I think that's what's been the biggest miss over these last few years. It is that Zion hasn't, maybe the approach of Zion when he came into this franchise, giving him the keys of the franchise, so to say, and he wasn't ready for it. Maybe isn't ready for it now. And then trying to fix everything around it to make that fit. You're hoping that Joe Dumars, who comes in there, being a former NBA player, being on a championship winning team, maybe he gets through Zion and maybe that's kind of the jump. But everything that you've kind of seen with that disconnect from your star franchise and the head of the organization, and then kind of hearing what DeJounte went through his season. And of course, to start off, like, someone has to go through that through an entire season. That's got to be the most difficult, heartbreaking thing you've got to go through, just because you've got one thing after another thing off the court. And then you're dealing with all these setbacks on the court, injuries, something that he said in the podcast, I've never suffered injuries like this before. Like, I've never had to go through anything like this. This was on my mental health. It disrupted me.
He said he felt stressed, mad, sad, angry, leading to the question whether he really wanted to play basketball
anymore. Like wanting to go play.
Somebody that loves the game.
That's bigger than the game.
That is bigger than the game. To deal with all of that, and just to see how he felt the organization didn't have his back, and that is kind of telling in that sense, where, like, all right, it makes sense where we've got to have a reset in this organization, and we've got to kind of figure this thing out, because it has been broken. And maybe they didn't want to admit it was broken, or maybe they didn't see these cracks that eventually ended up happening. And you're hoping that Joe Dumars and this new staff can kind of figure this out. But it is saying, like, this is why they it was more than just the injuries probably. and it felt like it was just a culmination of all these things that finally this was the season where he saw it all fall apart, and certainly DeJounte Murray adds to like some context to that.
And you mentioned, the reset. I agree. This is a team that needs a reset, and they've been needing a reset, honestly. And, bringing in Joe Dumars is cool, but so far, and obviously it hasn't been that long, it's still a lot of the same. We still have Willie Green, who you can make the argument, he dealt with so many injuries last year. You can see why Dumars would give him another shot. But I think the reset that the team needs and that they've needed for 2 years is trading Zion Williamson.
Right.
If you look across the NBA, every team, once again, Zion is a 7-year veteran in this league. He's played 0 playoff games. 0 in his 6 seasons.
Right.
Every team that drafted or traded for, in Oklahoma City's case, the face of their franchise during that span or around it has been in the playoffs. You want to take, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who trade for Donovan Mitchell and draft Evan Mobley. They were the 1 seed. You want to take the 2 teams in the finals right now, OKC with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the Indiana Pacers with Tyrese Halliburton, who they traded for. You want to look at the New York Knicks, who traded for Jalen Brunson, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who drafted Anthony Edwards, even the Rockets drafting Sengun and Jalen Green. You look at the Pistons drafting Cade Cunningham. They were in the playoffs. The Orlando Magic drafting Paolo Banchero after the Pelicans drafted Zion. I believe it was the year after. They're in the playoffs. Pretty much every team over that span across the league. About half the teams in the league, all the way down to the Atlanta Hawks and Trae Young, the Mavericks and Luka Doncic, who made the finals, who drafted a superstar, face of their franchise around that time, has had playoff success, except for the Charlotte Hornets. They haven't been good in a long time. But you look at the Pelicans and you're like, man, they've drafted the face of their franchise and they haven't done anything with them. And it's not like they've missed on other draft picks. Trey Murphy was a great pick. Yves Missi had a really good rookie year. Herb Jones, first team all defense. They're hitting in the supporting characters. Shaquille O'Neal says the others. You need the guy to be the guy. And when it's been time to be the guy, that guy in Zion has not been the guy. I think it's been time to trade him and get somebody new in him.
And I think they would have done that if they had gotten a top 3 pick.
Yeah.
If they had gotten another face of the franchise. But now, because of where they're picking in the draft, I think this is the point where they goes, all right, this is the last chance. This is the last, because I think they're going, and we've heard the public backing of Zion from Joe Dumars.
Right.
They're going to have to run with this, but eventually, sometimes he's, your guy's just not the guy. Maybe Zion isn't the guy. Maybe that's something you'll have to look next season, but it's going to happen this season where he's
Guys, I agree with everything you said. I mean, I'll go back to what Brandon Ingram said. It's not the first time that a player's questioned, again, the professionalism within the building. Again, he said, I just knew I needed a fresh start somewhere where guys play hard and listen. Again, I agree. Zion is an issue, but he's untradeable right now, and I think it's one of the reasons why they've kind of put their arms around him and said, he's our guy, because they have to. The other part of this is a new broom sweeps clean. If you want to change the culture, you have to change everything. And they've done that in the front office with Joe Dumars. And look, I know Willie Green, a lot of people like Willie Green. Willie Green, again, got a tough situation last year with the injuries. But at the same time, they had enough talent to win games and they didn't do it. So there's a disconnect there. So again, to me, if you are truly going to start over, you start over, okay? And right now, they've done much like they did with the Saints. They piecemeal it. They halfway it. They don't go all the way with it. And I don't know how they're going to rectify this situation if they don't get rid of the issues that they have within that locker room, because this is not the first player that's come out and said on the way out. In Murray's case, he's here, hey, this is not a professional organization.
Yeah, and I guess most Pelican fans who've caught the ire, like now that they have, all right, this is what we've been saying, this is what we've been seeing, like, is this a truly an organization that's committed and serious about winning? And yes, if you wanted to do that, this is the perfect time. You could have done it this offseason, wipe the slate clean, as you were saying.
Right.
But they didn't do that.
No.
So then it continues on where you're just kind of like, well, we're not going to really be serious about committing and really making changes. And certainly it's not happening this season, and who knows down the road if they're going to do that.
And will ownership pay more attention to this franchise? And that's the other thing.
Exactly. When it comes to Willie Green, Willie Green, he contributes to that culture. He's a former player.
Right.
He's been on several teams. He's seen what winning looks like.
Right.
So when you now are in charge of a franchise, it's your job to help build that culture as well. And I can see the pros and the cons of Willie. On the good side, he has extremely helped in the development of a Herb Jones,
no doubt,
of a Trey Murphy, of young guys like that. And not to bring up Zion again, I think where he has failed as a head coach, your job is to bring the best out of your star player. And Zion Williamson, going into year 7, still does not have a consistent jump shot, still is not a consistent defender, still has maturity issues, and I don't think that he's been able to bring the best out of Zion. So it was kind of 50-50 for me until you see what coaches are out there right now. You've got coaches of the years. You've got championship winning coaches who were fired and who are available right now. You know, maybe if you're the Pelicans, you've done your due diligence and said, I don't think we can get any of those guys. We'll stick with the guy we have. But I think that if you're going to rebuild, you got to do it all the way, and that starting with a new face at the head coach.
Andre Johnson Jr., Ricardo LeCompte, thanks so much for being on the panel today. We appreciate you guys coming down and being part of Inside New Orleans Sports. All right, that's it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, again, there's so many ways to catch our program. There's a QR code on your screen that'll take you to the WLAE-TV YouTube channel or to my website, ericasher.com, between WLAE-TV, WLAE-TV2, television, so many ways to catch our program. Set the DVR, you'll never miss the show. All right, you can catch me on the radio, 106.7 The Ticket, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, 106.7 The Ticket has our own app. You can download it at your app store, iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, other ways to catch the program. You can catch my podcast, the podcast of our radio show on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher. And as always, we want to thank the underwriters who make our show possible. Please support our underwriters, and of course also want to thank again the folks here at WLAE-TV who make our show possible. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Alex Chacon, who directed today, Ava Hickey, Margie Ellis, and of course we got to give a shout out to our director William Hill, who is out today. Again, thanks for watching. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.